This single interview changed the course of UFC history forever.
At the end of the day, no one knows who the f he is. And he's gonna be that guy when I'm world champion, when I'm a legend. He's gonna be at some pub talking some shit about, I beat that guy one time.
What was said as a dismissal would begin a chain of events that transformed the entire landscape of MMA. Because the man who received these words would become the fastest champion in UFC history, capturing titles in 2 divisions after just 7 fights. But to understand how a few words turned one man into one of the best fighters in history, we need to go back to when he didn't even know how to fight. On July 7th of 1987, Alex Sandro Silva Pereira was born in a poor neighborhood called São Bernardo do Campo in Brazil, and his life was anything but easy. With his father being a bricklayer and his mother a housewife, his family needed additional income to sustain themselves. So, at 12 years old, Pereira left school and began to work at a tire repair shop to help his family, where he had to work for 10 hours a day. For Pereira, this was not only heavy work, but also the beginning of something worse.
Com pessoas do bem, mas pessoas que talvez tenham vício ali, não tenham uma qualidade de vida bacana, entendeu? Sim. E, pô, a gente vai aprendendo esse tipo de coisa também. Como eu aprendi a trabalhar, ser um cara bacana e tal, eu aprendi também a beber. E isso eu não tive um controle, né, com a bebida.
Pereira would observe his coworkers drink and join them. He initially did it for fun. However, he slowly began to do it more and more.
Meio que não sei se é o nome correto, um ritual assim, tipo,
tinha.
Até meio-dia eu tomava 3 cachaças. Era umas 10, uma 11 e outra meio-dia, né?
Tinha os horários.
Tinha os horários.
Agora, quando o telefonezinho toca, lá tem compromisso? Sim, sem compromisso.
Não,
só um golinho.
Não, era assim, pô, não tinha condição, entendeu? Não tinha condição nenhuma, entendeu? De, pô, cerveja eu gostava, mas, pô, não tinha grana, entendeu?
By 16, Pereira had established a ritual that would dominate his daily existence.
Nessa época aí que eu tava, pô, já perdidão mesmo, eu bebia quase 1 litro por dia, entendeu?
But the problem that was taking control of his life would let him find his true talent. The drinking led to confrontations, and Pereira would find himself getting involved in fights. Most of the time, he was able to handle himself, but an idea began to be in his mind. He should learn how to fight properly.
Teve uma vez, aí eu falei assim, pô, o esporte é o que vai me salvar, né? E no Brasil é futebol,
Mas
né?
alguém te falou ou tu mesmo pensou?
Não, a gente sempre escuta isso, né? Sempre a gente escuta. Eu escutei em algum lugar, agora específico eu não sei, mas eu sempre escutava, na escola, sei lá.
Sim.
E aí eu falava, pô, tem que caçar um esporte. Aí, pô, futebol, o Brasil é futebol. Mas só que, cara, nunca joguei bola, não sei fazer nada.
Vai brigar na rua.
Aí eu falei, pô, brigar eu já briguei, pô, eu levo jeito, eu vou, né? Então eu procurei a arte marcial, que foi o kickboxing.
So, in 2009, Pereira entered a kickboxing gym with the simple goal of quitting alcohol. He began to practice, becoming better each time until he reached the amateur scene. And it was at that moment that Pereira understood that fighting was not only the road to sobriety, but also the road to a life of greatness. On March 31st, 2012, Pereira made his debut in the professional scene after he made a 25-3 record as an amateur. He still struggled with his alcohol problems during the first 4 years of his professional career. The discipline of training helped, but the pressure of elite competition often drove him back to the habits he was fighting to escape. However, despite his ongoing battles against alcohol, Pereira managed to work his way into Glory Kickboxing, one of the most prestigious organizations in the kickboxing scene. And by 2014, he had won the WGP Cruiserweight Championship, establishing himself as one of Brazil's most feared strikers. On April 2nd of 2016, Alex Pereira faced Israel Adesanya for the first time in the Glory of Heroes 1 event. At this point, Pereira had become a popular name in the scene. But that was nothing compared to the 18-win streak that Adesanya had. Adesanya was not only a favorite of the Chinese public, he was also one of the best middleweight kickboxers in the world. Pereira had only 15 kickboxing matches in total and had lost to every other top fighter in his division. Pereira knew that this was a fight he needed to win. In the fight, Adesanya utilized his long legs to keep Pereira at distance, while Pereira focused on using his fists. The two fought for 15 minutes, and when the final bell rang, Pereira won by unanimous decision. Pereira had his first victory over an elite-level opponent, proving that he was a top-level fighter. But to Adesanya and almost everyone else, the result should have been different.
And one time he won by a decision, which if I go back and watch that kickboxing fight, I do not agree with that decision.
After the fight, Pereira established himself as a legitimate contender, but it also created a rivalry with someone who would not accept defeat. Less than 1 year later, the rematch between Pereira and Adesanya was set. This time, Pereira was the crowd favorite, but Adesanya had learned from his mistakes. Pereira was completely dominated. Adesanya moved in and out, breaking down the Brazilian guard. And by the end of round 1, Adesanya looked like the clear winner of the fight. Round 2 began, and Adesanya kept being the dominant fighter. But just when Pereira was about to fall, the referee separated them and started a count for Pereira. This is what Pereira needed. He had enough time to recover from Adesanya's punches and survive the rest of the round. Before the last round, Pereira knew he was losing. Even if he could make a good final round, the judges would decide that Adesanya was the winner. So, Pereira had to go all in on this round. The third round began, and just around 30 seconds after,
挽回局势，不然，哦，左手摆拳，击倒了。
Pereira became the first person to knock out Adesanya. And this was just the beginning of his dominance on the kickboxing scene. Just 2 years later, Pereira did something never done before. He became Glory's first simultaneous two-division champion by winning both the middleweight and light heavyweight titles. He reached the absolute pinnacle of his sport. But while Pereira dominated kickboxing's highest levels, the man who he defeated twice was conquering an entirely different arena.
And look at these shots. Beautiful stuff with the jab. That's what set everything up. Combinations to the body. But look at it here. An even-paced attack. Didn't go crazy, didn't go nuts. Didn't allow Wilkinson to...
Adesanya made the switch to the UFC in early 2018 after his second loss against Pereira. By 2020, Adesanya had won the middleweight champion title and stood undefeated at 18-0. He was considered one of the best MMA fighters in the world. But even with all this success, Adesanya and the rest of the world couldn't forget one person. On March 3rd of 2020, Adesanya sat down for what seemed like a routine interview with Sporting News Australia. But without knowing it, this was a moment that marked a before and after in UFC history. The interviewer asked about his knockout loss to Pereira, and Adesanya answered,
He watches all my fights, and every time I fight, like clockwork, he'll try and put something out like, I beat this guy. But I've never ever watched any of his fights, ever. So at the end of the day, no one knows who the f he is. And he's gonna be that guy when I'm world champion, when I'm a legend. He's gonna be at some pub, talking some shit about, I beat that guy one time.
It sounded like a normal speech from a fighter. But for Pereira, those words hit him like a bullet to the brain. It forced Pereira to confront a fear from his past. Even with all his success in kickboxing, he still worried that alcohol could win in the end. So, he would spend the next few years proving that prediction wrong. What Adesanya intended as dismissal became the most powerful motivation Pereira had ever known.
Assim que o Israel entrou pro UFC, é claro que eu fiquei de olho, porque eu já tinha o interesse, né, de lutar MMA. Bom, aquele vídeo que postaram, né, a entrevista que o Israel Adesanya fez, me motivou muito, né?
He watches all my fights, and every time I fight, like clockwork, he'll try and put something out like, I beat this guy. At the end of the day, no one knows who the he is. And he's gonna be that guy when I'm world champion, when I'm a legend. He's gonna be at some pub, talking some about, I beat that guy one time.
Senti desafiado. E quando eu sou desafiado, ninguém me segura.
In 2020, Pereira made a decision that would reshape not only his life, but the entire landscape of mixed martial arts. He moved to Connecticut to become a part of the UFC team at Teixeira MMA and Fitness. This wasn't just a career change, it was a transformation to prove Adesanya's prediction wrong. The years of additional training had paid off. he wasn't the same fighter who had struggled in his early MMA attempts. Pereira put Thomas Powell to sleep with one devastating right hand in his LFA debut, impressing Dana White and earning him his key to the UFC world. On September 3, 2021, Pereira signed with the UFC and began its journey to this new challenge. At UFC 268 on November 6, 2021, Pereira made his debut against Andreas Michailidis. Just 13 seconds into the second round, Pereira launched a devastating flying knee that hit Michailidis on the chin, and this win put Pereira on everyone's radar. 3 months later, Pereira faced Bruno Silva at UFC Fight Night 203, winning by decision, where Pereira proved he could fight beyond the first round and add another win to his record. But just as Pereira's name was getting bigger in the UFC, his challenges did the same. At UFC 276, Pereira faced the number 4 in the division rank, Sean Strickland. The Brazilian waited patiently. Pereira throwed kicks to Strickland's body and leg for the first minutes of round 1. But just when the round was getting to its first half,
and I think that is why a level change or a shot on Pereira would be good, because he's... Oh! That's why.
You cannot stand in front of that man.
After this win, Pereira made clear that he was ready to fight for the championship.
Bom, muitas pessoas falam das duas vitórias que eu tive contra o Israel Adesanya, mas além disso, a gente está falando de kickboxing, né? Hoje é MMA, eu bati no 4 do ranking, então eu mereço disputar o cinturão.
Many people talk about my 2 wins over Israel Adesanya and say there was on kickboxing. Today I just beat the number 4 on the ring, so I know I earned it.
And he was not the only one who thought that he earned it. On November 12th of 2022, the most anticipated fight of the year was about to start. This was the third meeting between Pereira and Adesanya, with Pereira holding the 2-0 record. For Pereira, this wasn't just a fight for another title. It was the moment to answer the question, was he destined to be at a bar, or was he destined for something more? The opening round was a classic kickboxing match, a striking battle. Both were keeping their distance with kicks and punches. But just as the round was ending, Adesanya landed a combination that made Pereira almost fall. If this happened just moments before, the fight would have been over. Pereira recovered well in the second round and began to gain an equal position against Adesanya. But in round 3, Adesanya made a shift that no one expected. Adesanya shot for a takedown, and it worked. Pereira was caught off guard by the tactical switch and found himself on his back with nowhere to go. Adesanya controlled him completely, but he couldn't finish the fight in that round. By round 4, the effects of that grappling were becoming evident. Pereira's movements looked heavier, his reactions were slower, and his punches lost precision. Adesanya noticed it and took advantage of the distance with low kicks, jabs, and constant movement. However, Pereira refused to fall. After 4 rounds, all the odds were in Adesanya's favor. But before the last round, someone on Pereira's corner told him the words that he needed. Knowing he had to finish the fight before the bell rang, Pereira came out with more aggression. The key moment for Pereira came when Adesanya injured his leg when he tried a low kick. And with Adesanya's leg injured, Pereira found his opening. Pereira hit him with the same left hook that had knocked out Adesanya years before.
Pereira's had his most success for the body tonight. Oh, here's the left hook.
Here he goes.
Adesanya's on one. 2 more. Down goes the champion. Pereira trying to close the show.
Pereira cornered Adesanya against the cage and threw everything he had until the referee stopped the fight. The fight was over, and Alex Pereira had achieved the impossible. In just his 4th UFC fight, he won the middleweight championship. The man who was supposed to be in a bar drinking was now the champion of the world.
Eu me sinto muito bem, muito feliz. Já estava inscrito. Eu sabia que eu ia ser campeão. Eu sou um cara humilde, um cara que fala pouco, da forma que eu fiz. Algumas pessoas não gostaram. Eu peço desculpa, mas foi de uma forma saudável. Foi história, uma parte da história que eu vim postando. E algumas pessoas acharam que era provocação, mas não foi. Agradeço todo mundo aí pela torcida.
I feel so good. Been training all my life. I worked so hard for this. You are written.
This win wasn't just the end of his fear of ending up in a bar for the rest of his life. It was also the beginning of his conquest on a new arena. By March 2025, Alex Pereira had achieved something incredible in just a few years. He won UFC titles in 2 different divisions and established himself as one of the most feared strikers in history.
Bom, eu queria, né? Eu nunca sou de chamar ninguém, né? Mas eu acho que, pô, queria uma luta aí que é interessante pra mim. E seria interessante, eu tenho certeza que vai ser pra todo mundo. É uma pessoa que, de alguma forma, me incentivou quando eu tava em um bar bebendo. E ele, em um vídeo, falou que eu iria ficar em um bar. Mas ele me resgatou. Esse cara também falou, recente, que vai voltar só em 2027. E eu também, da forma que ele me resgatou, eu quero resgatar esse cara porque ele é um talento. Ele não pode ficar esse tempo todo parado. É o Adesanya.
Well, I'm not the type of guy that call people out, but there's a guy that back in the days he did some interview and said that I was going to be a guy to just stay in a bar. So that motivated me, and he rescued me from a bar to be here today.
Just a few words were the reason behind why a man struggling with alcoholism became one of the best fighters in UFC history.
I love this fucking story, eh? It's just the best. Like, he's actually at a bar drinking, and it's like, Sharma, boom, decides to become, MMA fighter. Or well, he was already an MMA fighter, but decides to like take it seriously and get to the UFC and fight me, chase me. But again, like I said, he chased me. I didn't do that. But I don't regret it, no. I am glad I did because it motivated him. And look what we've created. I created a monster.